The room felt different the moment Daniel walked in. He sat perfectly still, hands folded, smile measured to the millimeter. Everything about him felt rehearsed, like watching an actor who had memorized his lines too well. He praised the clinic, he praised the research, he even praised the waiting room lighting. When I asked a simple question, "What brings you here?" he delivered what sounded like a TED Talk on personal growth and leadership. It was flawless. It was also completely empty. Halfway through the session, I did something that changed everything. I slid a small handheld mirror across the table toward him. He smiled as if I'd made a joke. I didn't smile back. "Tell me what you see," I said. He glanced for barely a heartbeat, then locked eyes with me instead. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. His smile never moved, but something behind his eyes did, like a shadow turning over in a dark room. Finally, he said, "I'm exactly who I've worked to become." That sentence hung there, gleaming and airtight. But here's what caught me. It wasn't a person speaking. It was a mask describing itself. And maybe you've been asking yourself the same question about someone in your life. Are they fully aware of what they're doing, or are they blind to it? The unsettling truth is that both answers are correct. And that paradox is what keeps so many people trapped in these relationships, waiting for an awakening that may never come. This is the question almost no one asks in these stories. Not, what do they do when you figure them out? Not, what happens when they realize you're no longer playing along? We've covered those battles. The deeper question is simpler and more dangerous. Do they know what they are? Because the answer will change everything about how you understand these relationships, how you protect yourself, and most importantly, how you finally break free.
The performance that never ends. Here's what most people don't understand about narcissistic behavior. It's rarely a conscious plot to deceive. It's a survival system that runs so deep they can't tell where the performance ends and the person begins. Picture living your entire life on a stage where the curtain never falls. Every interaction is scripted. Every emotion is calculated. Every response is designed to maintain an image that feels more real than reality itself. After decades of this performance, the actor and the role fuse into something that can't be separated. Carl Jung warned that every psyche builds what he called a persona, the mask we show the world. At its best, the persona is flexible. You act one way at work, another at home, another with close friends. Healthy people can take it off like a coat when they're safe enough to be themselves. But when early shame hardens around a fragile core, the persona isn't a coat anymore. It's an armor fused to the skin. It doesn't come off. It's not a role I play. It becomes who I am. Charming, superior, admired, untouchable. That's the story the mask tells, and over time, they believe it as completely as they want you to. Jung discovered something crucial about human psychology. When parts of ourselves become too threatening to acknowledge, we don't destroy them. We banish them to what he called the shadow, the basement of the psyche where all our unacceptable traits live in exile. For most people, growth means eventually facing that basement, integrating those rejected parts, and becoming whole. Jung called this process individuation. It's messy, painful, and necessary for psychological health. But for those organized around narcissistic defenses, the shadow isn't just uncomfortable, it's absolutely intolerable. Because the shadow holds everything that contradicts their perfect image: inadequacy, envy, shame, desperate loneliness, the terror of being ordinary or flawed. To acknowledge the shadow would mean admitting the perfect image is a lie. It would mean facing not just current shame, but the original wound, usually from childhood, that was so overwhelming they built the entire defensive system to avoid ever feeling it again.
So instead of individuation, they choose perpetual performance. They project their shadow outward, making others carry the shame, the doubt, the chaos. They keep the mask polished while leaving the basement of their psyche permanently sealed. This is where the question, "Do they know?" becomes truly slippery. Watch what happens when you stop reacting to their performance. The charm doesn't shatter, it recalibrates. The praise grows warmer, the confession becomes more cinematic, the empathy becomes exquisite. But it's choreography, not contact. They're responding to your cues, adjusting the performance, maintaining the illusion. At this level, yes, they absolutely know. They can read a room like a master poker player reads tells. They can sense your triggers and adjust their approach with surgical precision. Emma once told me her partner admitted, almost proudly, "I know exactly which buttons to push with you." She thought it was progress, until hours later the same manipulative patterns returned. It wasn't confession, it was camouflage, a way to appear self-aware without ever touching the real wound. But here's the paradox. The same person who can orchestrate your emotions with laser precision cannot face the mirror of their own inner world for longer than a heartbeat. They know how to manipulate you, but they don't know why they need to. They can control the room, but they can't control the emptiness inside that drives the need for control.
The architecture of denial. Think of their psychological structure like a house built over a sinkhole. On the ground floor, everything looks immaculate. Polished furniture, carefully arranged photos, spotless surfaces. Guests come and go, admiring the decor, impressed by the presentation. But deep beneath, the foundation is eroding. The ground is unstable. Cracks are spreading through the basement walls. To acknowledge this truth would mean facing total collapse. So instead, they focus all their energy on the upstairs. Brighter lights, better furniture, louder parties. Anything to distract from the groan of the structure beneath. This is why their self-awareness feels so superficial. They'll acknowledge surface-level flaws, like, "I know I can be demanding sometimes," or "I'm a perfectionist, what can I say?" But these admissions are like rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. They address nothing fundamental while creating the illusion of insight. One client described how her father would offer what sounded like self-reflection. "I guess I lose my temper too easily." But the next day, he would explode again. It wasn't insight, it was a pressure valve. Just enough to avoid collapse while keeping the shadow hidden. Here's where their limited awareness becomes your psychological prison. They can't face their own shadow, so they make you carry it instead. Every insecurity they refuse to acknowledge gets projected onto you. Every flaw they can't admit becomes your responsibility to fix. You become the repository for everything they've banished from their self-image. Their shame becomes your self-doubt. Their envy becomes accusations of your selfishness. Their fear of abandonment becomes your suffocating surveillance. I worked with a client whose partner would accuse her of being manipulative every time she tried to discuss relationship problems. What he couldn't see, what he absolutely could not allow himself to see, was that he was describing his own behavior. The accusation was a projection so perfect it could have been a mirror.
This is tactical awareness without self-knowledge. They know exactly how to make you question yourself because they're unconsciously describing their own methods. They know which accusations hit hardest because they're revealing their own deepest fears. They can push your buttons so precisely because they're using their own instruction manual. The more they project their shadow onto others, the more empty they become. And the more empty they feel, the more they need external validation to fill the void. It's a feedback loop that drives them deeper into performance and further from authentic selfhood. This is why they can seem so hungry for admiration, yet nothing ever satisfies them. It's why they can extract mountains of emotional labor from others, yet always need more. They're trying to fill an internal void with external supplies, but external supplies can never touch an internal wound. Think of it like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. No matter how much water you pour in, it drains away immediately. So they don't fix the hole, they just demand more water, faster, from more sources. The people around them become the water. And you can pour yourself out completely, exhaust every ounce of empathy and energy you have, and it will never be enough because the hole remains untouched.
The liberation principle. 3 months after that first mirror session, Daniel returned. This time, when I slid the mirror across the table, something different happened. He looked, really looked, for maybe 10 seconds, an eternity, in that room. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller. I see someone trying very hard to be perfect. A pause, and I'm exhausted. It was the first real thing he'd ever said in my office, not the polished performance, not the strategic confession designed to impress me with his self-awareness, just truth, raw and undefended. But here's what happened next, and this is crucial. Within minutes, the mask reassembled itself. The exhausted human disappeared behind the polished performance. By the end of the session, he was back to praising my therapeutic approach and discussing his leadership philosophy. One moment of truth couldn't undo decades of defensive architecture. The glimpse behind the mask was real, but it was also fleeting. And that taught me something essential. Moments of genuine contact are possible, but they're not sustainable without the person choosing to do the ongoing work of integration. Clinicians have a term for this: microcracks. Brief moments when denial falters and the shadow leaks through. For empaths, microcracks are both powerful and dangerous. They look like hope. You hear exhaustion, loneliness, even humility, and you think, finally, the mask is breaking. But microcracks aren't transformation, they're pressure releases. Without the courage to remain in that discomfort long enough to change, the defenses slam shut again, sometimes stronger than before. So, do they know what they are? Here's the answer that will liberate you. They know enough to perform, but not enough to transform. They know how to secure admiration, how to bait sympathy, how to orchestrate a room. But they don't know themselves. They cannot know without dismantling the very system that has held them together since childhood. And here's what matters most. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you know who you are, that you choose to face what they won't, that you integrate what they deny, that you live authentically while they perform desperately. Your freedom does not depend on their awakening. Your healing does not require their self-awareness. Your peace does not need their confession. Your future does not hang on their willingness to change. This is the hook that keeps so many empaths trapped, the belief that if they can just love hard enough, explain clearly enough, or wait patiently enough, eventually the mask will crack and the real person will step forward permanently. But what if that day never comes? What if the mask is the self they're willing to live and die behind? Jung taught that individuation, the process of becoming whole, can only be done by the individual. No therapist can face your shadow for you. No partner can integrate your rejected parts. No amount of love from others can substitute for the courage to meet yourself honestly. That truth cuts both ways. Just as you are the only one who can heal your wounds, they are the only one who can heal theirs. And if they refuse, the work remains undone, no matter how much of yourself you sacrifice trying to do it for them. Think of it like carrying two suitcases through an airport, one filled with your belongings, the other filled with theirs. For years, you've been struggling under both weights, wondering why the journey feels so exhausting. But the moment you realize the second bag was never yours to carry, you can set it down. Suddenly, your steps are lighter. The path opens. The destination becomes clearer. You stop measuring your progress by how far you can drag someone else, and start measuring it by how far you can walk when you're free. And here's the profound shift that completes the picture. Their denial of self-knowledge becomes your doorway to wisdom. Every projection they cast teaches you about your own triggers. Every manipulation they attempt shows you where your boundaries need strengthening. Every mask they wear clarifies what authenticity actually looks like. They become unwitting teachers in the curriculum of your own growth, not because they intend to help you, but because their very resistance to truth illuminates the path toward it. The very thing they resist, facing the shadow, is exactly what you are doing right now. By seeing the dynamic clearly, by acknowledging what will never change, by accepting their choice without making it your responsibility, you step into the individuation work they fear most. You meet truth. You hold complexity. You integrate what they deny. And that makes you stronger than any mask they can wear.
The choice that defines everything. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." In episode 1, we saw the mask crack, their desperate reactions when you finally recognize them. In episode 2, we saw what happens when they know you know, the projection cycle shattering, the balance of power shifting. And now we've confronted the deeper question: do they know what they are? The answer is both yes and no. Yes, they know how to perform, but no, they don't know themselves. And the gap between those two truths is why they remain trapped, and why you don't have to. Because the end of their illusion is the beginning of your individuation. Their refusal to face the shadow does not doom you to the same fate. You can stand where they collapse. You can walk where they circle. You can carry your own darkness without handing it to someone else, or accepting theirs in return. This is liberation, not waiting for their apology, not holding out for their awakening, not bargaining with their mask. Liberation is choosing clarity over confusion, boundaries over chaos, truth over illusion. And here's the paradox Jung understood. Once you stop carrying someone else's shadow, you don't just free yourself, you begin to free everyone around you. Your clarity breaks the cycle for future relationships, future friendships, even future generations. You stop inheriting their denial and you stop passing it forward. The greatest act of defiance against their illusion is your authenticity. The most powerful response to their denial is your truth. The ultimate freedom from their mask is your willingness to show your real face, scars, shadows, and all. They may never face who they truly are, but you can.
You can choose consciousness over performance, integration over projection, authenticity over approval. And that choice, your choice, is the line between living in someone else's theater and finally stepping into your own life. Because here's the truth that will set you free. The door was never locked. The key was always in your hands. The cage was always an illusion. The only thing left to do is stop asking whether they know what they are and start becoming fully who you were meant to be. Your sensitivity was never your weakness. Your clarity was never an accident. And your freedom will never depend on their permission to see themselves clearly.
The question behind the mask isn't whether they know what they are. The question is whether you're ready to stop caring about their answer and start living your own truth. If you've been waiting for their awakening, for their confession, for their moment of genuine self-recognition, this is your permission to stop waiting. Your healing begins the moment you realize their awareness was never the key to your cage.
The evolution continues. Your story is just beginning, and it starts the moment you choose yourself over their performance, your truth over their mask, your freedom over their approval. Because the most revolutionary act you can commit against someone who lives behind a mask is this: take off your own.